Hello, you're listening to Me and Paranormal You with your host, Ryan Singer. Because it's more fun to believe. Hey, everybody. That was funny to me. Thanks for listening to another experience of Me and Paranormal You. This is your host, Ryan Singer. I'm excited today. This is a chat that I've wanted to happen for a long time. I've got Adam Fleisher joining me, or how do they say it in the South?
Fleisher.
Fleisher. Got Adam Fleisher joining us over late.
At least they used to. There's been a few Fleischers since.
I get that Fleisher boy over here.
Yep.
We've known each other for a little while. We actually met in where you live, down in the Tampa area of Florida, and when I was doing a show there, I think it was last year, right?
Yeah, like October, I think.
Yeah, about a year ago, I guess, roughly now, and we are on the cusp of a hurricane getting ready to come through your area. So hopefully, everything's going to be okay in the next 48 hours down there for you. I appreciate you taking the time to chat today.
Absolutely.
And listeners may or may not know you as the voice behind the voice. I mean, that's what I call podcast editing. The editor currently still, right?
Yeah.
The Good Medicine podcast with our good friends, Jessica and Oscar.
Yeah.
So, the voice behind the voice, the working the dials and the knobs on the Good Medicine podcast, which is such a great podcast, by the way. And we obviously love them over here. But I'm glad that we're going to chat today about, the journey that you've been on. And it's not like it just started. Is it fair to say that maybe even when you were younger, there were things happening that, in hindsight now you realize are nudging you into a certain direction?
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I've always been fascinated with, the paranormal and, the unseen and everything, but I never really um, felt like I had a lot of stuff going on. I had but like you say, as I look back, there's some weird things that went on. Nothing overt that I could even convince my mother of sometimes, but certainly some rather odd happenings, and certainly convinced me that things like psychic abilities and stuff like that were rare, even if I only experienced them every once in a while.
Yeah, I mean, is there a moment that sticks out to you from? I mean, I at this point have personally, I have just full on accepted that even though I go through extended periods of lapse where I'm not trying to cultivate or hone or get better at my psychic powers or my intuition, that it is just there's absolutely no denying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because there's certain areas of my life where I'm just like, I know I'll get a sense of something and I'll be like, I know that's going to happen, or I know this is going to be going this way, and it's not even a big deal anymore. I just kind of accept it, and when it happens, I'm like, oh yeah, I knew that. Now, is there a moment that stands out to you from I don't know, recent memory or even long ago that kind of is one of these watershed moments for you?
Yeah, well, um, one of the stupidest things, but definitely one of the things that stands out. I was like 4 years old, and I was sitting in the afternoon watching cartoons on TV, and it was December, and the Christmas tree was up, and I just all of a sudden knew that the Christmas tree was going to fall over, and like 5 minutes later, the Christmas tree fell over, and I just very clearly remember just being sure that that was going to happen, and my mom was outside or something. I didn't go get her, and sure enough, a few minutes later, the Christmas tree just fell over.
Yeah, I mean, that is, you know, as silly as it sounds, it does plant these seeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'll give you an example of something that is equally well. Even it's not a contest who's got the more mundane and boring premonition.
Yeah.
That's a contest no one wants to win. But I woke up this morning and I was like, "Oh, I bet Matt Carpenter for the New York Yankees. He's he's coming back
Mm.
to play this season." I don't know. I have no idea why I wake up thinking about this, right? And so I get on the computer. I'm just kind of checking emails and just kind of looking around. And next, there's a story. Matt Carpenter is likely to come back this season, and I'm just like, why is this? This is where I'm channeling my efforts,
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, all the time,
um,
stuff like that.
right? So you've got little seeds planted along the way,
Yeah.
right? And I'm curious if you remember the cartoon you were watching. Was it like Hanna Barbera Friends or like the
I
Laugh
don't
Olympics or
remember
something
that
like
for
that?
sure. I do about a year before that. Another weird thing. We were living in a different house. I know I was about three, and I'm watching cartoons, and there's a Fruit Loops commercial on with Toucan Sam, and in the little TV room, and there's a door, sliding glass door there right next to the TV, and a toucan flies down and lands right in front of the door, and like a little black toucan with a yellow and orange beak, and I'm like, what's going on? And I go run, tell my mom. It flies off after a second. I go tell my mom, Mom, there's a toucan. I was watching for Loops commercial. There's a toucan. You want to see Toucan Sam? I'm growing up in North Central Florida. It's not toucan territory. Um, so that actually is something that I've always been curious about. And of course, she didn't believe me. She's like, it was another bird. You didn't see a toucan. I'm like, no, I
Yeah.
saw a toucan.
It is interesting, like what memories stick with us. I
Yeah.
mean, that, and I hesitate to ascribe meaning to everything just because of the way we remembered it, because there are significantly mundane things that we remember that just like will be in our head. And I'm just like, why is this
Hmm.
there? Why is this
Hmm.
taking up space? And I can't remember, the, you know, the reason why Pythagorean's theorem is a thing.
Yeah.
But I can remember this other BS. But but there are certain things that I guess spark our interest, and they start to stockpile, and eventually, before we realize it, we can look back and be like, oh, there's all these there's this big pile of tiny things
Hmm.
that have led to a large interest for me, that have now that has now taken a hold on my life. And maybe there is a slow burn or a slow build effect to the paranormal for a lot of people. I think we see that in the world around us now.
Hmm.
More and more people are, in the last 7 years, 10 years, have become pretty fascinated and into the world of the paranormal. And I think it's for good reason. This isn't an exclusive club that only a certain
Hmm.
amount of people are allowed to belong to. Hopefully at some point the whole world belongs to it, and it's just normal. Where currently, amongst the belief, just I think I already know the answer to this, but I think it's worth asking. Like, on the scale of belief, or where amongst the believers you fall, what's your current camp?
I am the type of person that I have sometimes a annoyingly logical mind. So even the experiences that I've had that defy any sort of rational according to science and mainstream thinking, that they defy that completely. I try to logically, think of any other explanation that I can think of. Um, I've but I'm open minded to everything. I'm not the type of person that's like, oh, well, this is obviously this. It's just for myself. I'm always trying to think of what else could this have been. Why did that table, leap across 3 feet of the room, and or I. we were experience helping to cross over a ghost one time, and I had a ghost run through me, and it was like an electric shock up and down my body, and
Well, we have to. I think we're not just going to brush by this story.
no, no,
Uh, so okay, so you got to set the stage here for me
absolutely,
about
absolutely.
this story.
Well, this was probably 2010, 2011, or whatever. It was quite a while ago. I, like I say, I've always been fascinated with paranormal, even growing up reading books and aliens and ghosts and all this stuff. Always concerned, not concerned with, but interested in it. So went to Thanksgiving at my mom's house up in Gainesville that year, and my uncle, who had slowly become a very much a hardcore Christian conservative, um, he came over, and he was a good guy, but very intense. Like, he had been a Navy diver, deep sea diver, and had spent time in like Thailand and Singapore and stuff, and become a hardcore Buddhist, vegetarian, everything, and then came back to the States and slowly, sorry, uh, moved away from that. And like I say, before he died, he became very much hardcore Christian. So Ghost Hunter Marathon was on. My mom, loved the Ghost Hunters, and he comes in, he starts talking about, oh, this is satanic. You're not supposed to commune with the dead and all this stuff. And um, I not didn't get in an argument with him, but the next week I went and joined a local paranormal group just to be like, fuck you, buddy, because I always fascinated with it, but just never really explored it for myself. So through people I met there and other groups and stuff, I had some weird experiences, but I looked at or hooked up with this one group, and the guy that led it is a former cop, former uh, helicopter evac in Nam and stuff, and like, this guy was hardcore, not the type of guy you would easily dismiss as a ghost hunter or whatever. And so we're in this house over in Lakeland, and weird things definitely were going on in this house. And he brings us all in. He's like, it's right off of I-4. I know you probably know, driving the I-4 corridor from Orlando to Tampa or vice versa. It's a really busy road, and a lot of accidents. And he says that this kid was in high school or something, was on a motorcycle. He's you know died in a wreck on I-4, which is quarter mile across the yard from this house, and he wants to cross them over. And at this point, I'm hadn't had a lot of experiences, and kind of, I would never call myself an agnostic, because I think that's a kind of an arrogant way of. I'm not agnostic, but atheist. Excuse me. I would never say I'm an atheist, because I always feel that's a little bit of an arrogant position to take. I prefer agnostic at best. Um, so anyways, we're standing around in a circle, and um, like 10, 12 people, and focusing on moving the energy around. And I'm sitting here kind of like with my eyes closed, and just like, okay, I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm going along with it. And he says, well, we've opened up the portal, and we're crossing the spirit over, and he's heading into the light. And all of a sudden, I just feel like an electric, like, if you ever touched like an electric fence or something, like that full body like vibration you get.
Oh yeah, anybody who grew up around farms, I think,
Mm-hmm.
or with access to rural areas that had the electric fence to keep the animals in and stuff like that. I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it's like a rite of passage as a kid to get zapped. You know what I
yep.
mean? Like
Oh yeah,
on purpose, almost. On purpose, not just like, oh, he fell into the fence and got zapped. It's like, no, everybody always wants to see what it feels like to get zapped, and so
absolutely.
I know exactly what that feeling's like.
It was like that without any pain. It was just that full body like vibration. It kind of like felt like it started at my knees and just like went up through my head, and I burst out in tears. and just no idea what's going on. And like at that exact same moment, he's like, "There's another spirit that just ran in." He says it's a girl that died in on I-4 as well, and she's like, don't forget me, or don't close it. She's like desperate to get into the light. Like I say, I have no visual, you know, verification of any of this. It's just literally the same time that he says this, I just feel this sensation. So that was the only explanation that I could come up with, as far as what I was feeling. And he's on the other side of the circle from me. It's not like he has any ability to throw that energy at me that I'm aware of. And it's not like we were
Yeah, I mean,
touching.
the proof's in the pudding, as they say.
Exactly, exactly.
When you have an experience like this, like an unexpected experience, even though this is the weird, there's a weird catch, right? For me regarding this stuff, because you go out looking for something, right?
Hmm.
And then when something happens, it's still somewhat unexpected in,
Absolutely.
in many ways. In the nature or the style of the experience, there's no way to truly pinpoint what you're going to get. And I think this is a great example of that.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. It really is the type of thing that just kind of shakes you. And you know like I say, I don't subscribe to a particular religion. Kind of raised Catholic adjacent, but a few years of Catholic school and stuff like that. But I certainly can't deny that there's something more than what we experience here.
At the very least, I think from what you're describing, we can say you had an experience that is unexplainable, at least to normal convention.
Hmm.
It's not like, some bug flew by and gave you the chills and made you start crying, and or you know what I
Exactly.
mean? So I'm curious about the reaction of the group after this happens.
I nobody really seemed that phased by it. It was kind of a weird group of people. Quite a bit older than I was at the time. I mean, I was probably in my 30s at the time. Um, but yeah, nobody really said that much about it per se, because nobody else experienced it. I think
Yeah,
it's
and it
just kind of
is.
like, oh, that's cool, But
Yeah, that is an interesting part of investigations with groups. Obviously, not there's not a ton of people out there who just are always going solo, but it is always very nice to have someone else around.
mhm.
And I definitely 100% prefer that. But you when someone else experiences something that you're all there looking for, it is exciting, but it's like excitement adjacent as well, because you're
Mhm.
like, well, I don't understand exactly what you're feeling, but I can see the results or the effects of this experience on you.
Mhm.
And then there's also another little part of you that's like, man, I want to feel it, man.
Exactly. Exactly.
Why don't I get that? But then there's other times where you're like, well, I'm glad I didn't have that
Yeah.
experience. But
Interesting
there,
side note, though. My uncle that uh, you know kind of got me to the impetus to join the group. He died a couple years ago, and I had to, like, nobody had heard from him for a few days, and sure enough, my mom asked me to drive up, and sure enough, he had passed away on the couch, had a heart attack.
oh
And
gosh,
yeah, and I had that day cleaning the house an experience with him, and have had a few other experiences. He actually manifested completely to my mom the following year. And so I find it very interesting that the man that was so like, oh, don't commune with the devil and stuff, is, or with ghosts, is satanic. That he has had I've had multiple experiences with him.
that is really cool, because to me that's very encouraging.
Hmm.
Is when I was in college the first time, I had a class that apparently, everybody's like, oh, you got to take this class. This guy's the best professor. Is this older guy. and it was basically, I forget I think the name of the class was like interpersonal communication or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, the guy had like written some books, and like a big chunk of this class was how to turn your enemy into your best friend,
Mm-hmm.
or like how to turn a bastard into your buddy. Basically,
Yeah.
was what it was about. And I just remember him kind of saying, like, he's like, you might not believe this, and uh, that's fine, but I'm going to show you and prove to you that through these techniques or through whatever else, that the people who are like your enemy, like your biggest enemy, could in fact truly become your greatest ally.
Mm-hmm.
And people don't want to like admit that, or don't want to accept that as like something that's true. But I guess there's something about the intensity of the energy that's experienced between two people, and the nature or the flavor of that energy
Mm-hmm.
is mutable, is very changeable. And it's just a question of figuring out a way to get there, right? And to change it. And this reminds me of what you're telling me about your uncle. This reminds, and we're talking about like, we're straight up, at least in my belief, talking about energy here,
Mm-hmm.
100%. And so why I say it's encouraging is because like the energy, the true essence of who your uncle was, because clearly he was a seeker and someone who had been through a lot, had seen a lot, and obviously was open to new ideas, considering that he'd become like a vegetarian and got really into Buddhism. And I'm just guessing he was not raised in such a way.
No.
And then you know came back, and then again was influenced and changed in those beliefs. And so his energy was that of a shifter,
Mm-hmm.
someone who was always moving around, someone who was willing to consume new ideas, new beliefs, and new energy, and then for better or worse, depending on people's opinions, could have his own energy changed, and was willing to change in some ways. So the fact that he's now that same energy is on the other side, and now has speculatively become witness to the ultimate truth of everything that is about the universe, that energy will be like,
Big
very,
perspective shift, you know?
yeah. a You're not a hypocrite if you learn new information and change your mind,
Yeah.
right? Like that's one of the biggest flaws, I think, of at least Western society. Someone gets new information, realizes that their previous beliefs or opinions were probably incorrect or not fully formed, so they now have new ideas with new information presented to them, and now they're like, "Oh, you're a hypocrite." It's like, no, I just learn. It's called learning.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds like potentially this could be a situation where your uncle was like, he got the ultimate lesson in the truth of the universe, which, well, obviously none of us have until we've crossed over and or come back, or permanently crossed over.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we never stop learning even after the life is over, right?
Which part of me is like, God, come on. Can I just be done learning? Can I just But then it's like, oh no, that learning doesn't have to have such a negative connotation. Learning is like, I mean, we're learning whether we realize, learning just is, that word has associations attached to it for me, that I'm just like, oh, I'm just I don't, sitting at a desk, being quiet, being hungry, being tired, being told information. That's not, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have to be learning. That's trying to get a kid to memorize shit. Okay, so you have a ghost pass through you. You This is, over a decade ago, towards the ends of the yachts,
Mm-hmm.
or at the yachts. I don't know what the yachts are and what they're not. Whether it's before 2010 or the 2010s. I don't know which ones are the yachts.
I think it's the zeros, the before 2010.
Okay, so before the yachts. So right at the end of the yachts, at the beginning of the tens.
Got to say it with a New England accent, you know.
The yachts.
In two oh
And
two
ought to.
ought to.
Oh wow, I didn't know people's. Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm like, actually, oh, that's what that person was saying. Now I'm like
Yeah.
going through all these recollections. The You have a ghost pass through. You join this group. You're kind of part of this group. Do you stay with that group for a while after this?
No, I actually, it was not too long after that. My friend that had gotten me involved with them, she kind of had a falling out with them, and that was her own thing, and I did stay with them, um, but realized that some of the evidence that was being collected was just people's ignorance of how like digital cameras worked and shutter speed and everything, and just it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth because these guys wanted so bad to get their own show. They wanted so bad to. Um, you're still there, right? You're frozen. I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay,
No, I was just
sorry.
like a statue listening.
Yeah, yeah. No, they wanted their own show. Talking about that all the time, and presenting this stuff without looking at it critically. And like I say, I don't doubt that the leader of this group had major psychic abilities and major ability. I experienced way too much stuff with them to doubt that, but he just had such an attitude and such an arrogance about it. It just kind of turned me off, so I kind of faded out. Um, but like I say, a lot of the pictures that the woman that owned the house had taken, basically she just had her shutter speed on her camera, way up, so it was the iris was open for a long time. It was creating light streaks, and he's like, "Oh, you can see the spirit here," and no, it's because it's taking 2 minutes for one picture, so it's
Yeah,
yeah.
that is. I mean, I get it. I mean, I'm in entertainment. I, I guess I understand the desire, the want, or whatever to. It's just interesting though, like what's happened in the last 10 years, 15 years. The like every, especially when reality television became a thing,
Hmm.
people call it unscripted, whatever. It's all reality, um, and because it is scripted,
Hmm.
and as unscripted as it's just as scripted as it is unscripted, and it's like, oh, that was an interesting moment. Let's do that again because the cameras weren't really on you.
Hmm.
So it's like people are like, oh, can you believe this happened? It's like, or do you see how that? Did you see? But it's like, yeah, that was done. And in none of those. Yeah. Anyway, we don't have to get into a whole discussion about reality television, but it is. I mean, because like people, every comedy club that's ever existed, the staff there says there should be a reality show about this place,
Hmm.
right? Every single comedy club that has ever opened its doors believes that,
Yeah.
um, and on top of that, they're all haunted, which that's not even what they're talking about. But then they're also haunted anyway. So it is a little discouraging when you're a part of a group and it's not about can we have this experience that's going to be extravagant or extra normal or extraordinary. It is about where the main focus of everything is like, shouldn't we should have our own television show. We should blah blah blah
Hmm.
blah blah. And that gets a little it fatigues me
Oh,
if
for
if
sure.
if I'm around that. So I totally understand what you're saying because not everything has to be a television. And like there was this great actor who I went to college with,
Hmm.
and he's not an actor anyone's ever heard of. And I hope he's still acting. And we were young, and when asked who his favorite actors were, I'll just never forget this. He said something along the lines of, "My favorite actors are the ones I've never even seen yet. They're the ones who just love acting so much. They're doing, their local productions, until the day they die,
Oh, for sure.
and they're just so good at acting." But they didn't care about being famous or getting on TV or in movies. They just loved to act.
For sure.
And most certainly the best paranormal investigators in the world are probably people that no one will ever hear about unless they investigate with them.
Yeah, yeah, and I know certainly at that time it was everybody was like so competitive and oh, this is our spot and you can't investigate there or whatever, and it just was. I'm sure it's
Very
probably still
territorial.
that way, but
Yeah.
um, it kind of turned me off just being around people that kind of had that attitude and um, could kind of really act like a real asshole sometimes. It's like you don't need that.
Yeah, it's like this location isn't going to be the golden egg that gets everybody rich and famous. And
Exactly.
well, let's take a quick break real quick, and then we're going to shift gears and talk about the things that we do enjoy
Absolutely.
and love, and also a little bit more about your personal journey. And just as a reminder to people listening, you can have all of the as of recently, I've started posting all of the episodes ad free. So if you want an ad free experience, go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer. And for $3 a month is the minimum there. You can do higher, more than that. But for $3 a month, you can get all these conversations and all the 30-year bonuses, everything else ad free. So if you're like me and you don't love commercials, I mean, imagine a world where there's no commercials. It's kind of easy if you can just close your eyes and imagine. It'd be amazing. Um, but yeah, go to patreon.com/Ryan Singer. You can get all these ad free. Okay, we're back. And we've been covering a little bit of ground about, like, one of the big experiences you had when you first started. Just as a reminder, I'm here with Adam Fleischer, who's the editor of the Good Medicine podcast. He's also an editor, a videographer, all kinds of things, giving me advice and tips. Actually, I should just pay you money to I should just pay you money to do the work that I'm, like, woefully unskilled to be able to pull off. Maybe we'll discuss that later. But um, the uh, the idea that one has certain moments in their life, clearly, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but when it comes to editing the Good Medicine podcast, and just through all those conversations and experiences that Jessica and Oscar have with people, through your own very personal experience, when it comes to what many would consider to be the most intense of intense kind of personal experiences that hold a mirror up to yourself and life itself.
Mhm.
um I think someone can come to a pretty unique perspective.
Oh, for sure, for sure. You know, especially with Jessica and Oscar, it's been such an interesting thing. I became aware of them through your show, but it wasn't even the episode that they were on. It was the one that Mario had come on a few months later, and I'm listening to him describe his experiences, and it just something was pushing me like you've got to listen to that episode. I somehow had skipped that one, and went back and listened to it and reached out to her. I think that same day, the next day, um, and signed up for her 4 course, not course, but 4 sessions of the different seasons or whatever she calls it, and it was really interesting. We The first 2 were good, but I have a thing where I start to visualize things and see things, and I want to analyze it. That logical mind getting in there, and it kind of will disappear on me a little bit. And so the third session, Oscar really wanted me to focus on just letting go and just seeing, but not thinking about what I'm seeing. Just let it wash over me, essentially. And it was really interesting because he started, like, at first I saw him, like this face, like right in front of my face. Its eyes were right where my eyes were and everything, and he receded back, and he Jessica confirmed that it was him, and he started doing like one eye would get real big and the other one real small, and fluctuate back and forth and kind of comically, and I said it reminded me of like Deadpool from the comics, where they would draw him with one eye real big to show emotion or his zany whatever zany thing he's doing. So as we're going through the guided meditation stuff, every time I start analyzing it too much, I would see him like at the corner of the vision kind of pop up and with like a little like sign and it's like focus, focus. um,
Almost like a
which was
highway flagger, like the
exactly.
people when you're entering a construction zone, they're like slow, like the
Yeah.
little sign that says slow down.
Yeah. And so that night we finished up the session. That night I'm laying in bed. I'm kind of, meditating and just kind of just letting it all wash over with me. And he comes to me again. He's like, we're going to practice. And okay, and I didn't know what to think. And like, if you imagine like your field of vision with your eyes closed, like the old Disney World, Disneyland, they would have like the panorama movies that they show up on like the ceiling of the buildings, and sometimes they would show like one side of the movie over here and then something else over here, and to the right or the left, and it would change and all that type of stuff. I don't know that they still do those type of things. This is the 80s. but but it was exactly like that. Like literally, like in my right eye, I would see one image. My left eye, I would see another one, and they would change. And he's like, "These are places. Some of them you could go. Some of them you could, spiritually, astral travel to. But don't worry about that. Just let it wash over you." And it was probably 20, 30 minutes of just these incredible vistas and uh, back in time, like at one point I remember like it was like misty and like a dinosaur of some sort was like walking past. One of them was like this seascape. It was like hexagonal rocks in like a purple ocean, like with crashing up on these rocks and stuff. I don't even remember most of the stuff, but the few that I do remember are just crazy and just would stay up there for a few moments and change to something else. And I couldn't concentrate. I just had to concentrate on not concentrating on it. Just let it wash over me. Um, which all well and good, that could easily have been a dream. It could have been whatever. The next week we have our fourth session, and Jessica, I guess before she has her sessions for the day, she sits down and kind of checks in with Oscar what each person needs. And she gets to me and he's like, "Oh, Adam's good." So this is the first thing she asks me when we come on. She's like, explains what he said. And I'm like, "Well, yeah, he came to me and we did a whole session of training of how to focus on not focusing." And so that was certainly a validation that I'm the type of person that loves that extra validation of what I experienced. And the next 2 hours, he proceeded to well, she just dictated what he was telling her about this whole idea of doing a documentary that would allow people to reconnect with the earth and focusing on water and all this stuff. It was crazy. I wish I had recorded it because there was just so much information. Just that's all it was. Just her listening to him and telling me what he's telling her. Um, so yeah, that was that was really crazy. Probably not the best thing for everybody, but as far as if you're charging somebody for a guided meditation thing and you go and just dictate what somebody else in your head is telling you. But I found it really really interesting, and now I reached out to her a few months later. I was listening to her podcast and had heard somewhere where it had an issue, and just I don't know if it was Oscar or my own thing, but I was like, oh, you should offer to edit it. So I did, and we started doing that, and we become real good friends. we're going to actually go down to Colombia in January, and one of the spiritual retreats down there, and um, kind of exploration of jungle magic and ayahuasca and jungle medicine and ayahuasca and all this stuff. So I'm really looking forward to this. Unfortunately, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer earlier this year, so that's been a bit of an inconvenience for my 2022. But from what everything is telling me, that kind of exploring these roads might be very beneficial for the ongoing treatment of that. So.
Yeah, and I mean that is, at the very least, to say one of life's biggest curveballs can
Mm-hmm.
be thrown at you. That was when was it? Was that towards this? Was that I'm trying to remember. Was that the spring?
It was actually, I started really feeling sick around Thanksgiving, and I had some tests run through December, and I think it was probably January where found out it was actually going to be cancer, and I think February when we found out to the extent, and I was in the hospital for a little bit.
Yeah,
Um, Very lucky as far as my body responded very well to the chemotherapy and all that type of stuff. And right now, hopefully, we're good. But right now, seem to be mostly cancer free. But it even in that, it's been a really weird. Like I have two types of cancer. One like traditional colon cancer, and then I also have small cell carcinoma, which is usually a lung cancer that I don't have in my lungs, but I had it in my spine and my liver, um, and I guess in the colon a little bit as well. But uh, that one at least has responded very well to the chemo. All the tumors died off almost immediately. I feel really good, especially now that I'm off of the chemo. But I still have a mass in the colon. I don't know for sure what if it's dead or if it's still alive. But the doctors are more concerned with the small cell because that tends to come back. I guess it stays in the body as stem cells and can come back at any time. So um, you know the doctor that I've been seeing was kind of like, we could do surgery and you could have a colonoscopy bag, but probably wouldn't live any longer. Um, and I definitely don't want to explore that avenue. But I feel like, when this is what kind of getting back to what you said, that sense of, oh, I've gotten nothing to worry about. Not that I don't have anything to worry about, but Oscar and other people I've spoken to have all seen me getting well from this and recovering from this completely and going on to do these other things, and that is a weird comfort, as much as I tend to not doubt it, but go back and forth sometimes. You know I guess I can say I've never felt through this whole year that I'm going to die right now, in this immediate time. It might do me in somewhere down the road, but I'm weirdly okay with all that. Not that I'm going to do anything to hasten it, but I just don't feel like I'm going to go right now.
yeah.
So
Now, well, I mean, I appreciate you sharing that with us, and I'm curious if your ideas of life and death in general have been reshaped because of this experience.
you know, weirdly, I'm a lot more sure that there's more out there. I just feel that in my depth. I with the experiences that I've had, I just have no doubt. I don't know what that is exactly, but I'm very curious to find out. But I've felt like that for a long time, even as a kid. I for whatever reason, just never really fear death. People talk about, or I would talk to people and they would be like, "Oh, the idea if you just cease to exist, that's terrifying to me." I'm like, that sounds fine. Like you wouldn't know what's going on. It's much preferable to the Judeo, well, I guess Christian version of hell. Like, it's not even Judeo. The eternal damnation, gnashing of teeth. Is like I don't want that.
Yeah, yeah,
Like if I just cease to exist, I just the thought never has bothered me at all.
yeah. As if this life wasn't difficult enough as it was.
Yeah,
Now I have an eternity of being tortured. I mean, this seems a little. This seems a little bit of overkill here.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
I guess pun intended, but the it is. I mean, it's very inspiring to me because, like, my girlfriend would tell you, or people who have known me throughout my past, or like my mom, or whoever. Like, if I even have like bronchitis, or and I'm waiting for actually. I have to do my COVID test now. I got COVID like a little over a week ago, but I feel fine. But I was never that bad off with it, but I just can't go out in public until I'm negative, right? But
Mm,
like, if I'm like, even if I have a cold, I am just like, I am milking every drop of I'm sick. Do this for me. I'm a baby. I'm such a brat
mm,
when it comes to just the way I I know this about myself, and I'm trying to do better, but then there's moments where you're like shook and awake, like,
mhm.
hey, get your shit together. Like, are you serious right now? You have a sniffly nose and you're being a brat about this? Like, get your shit together and like get some perspective. So like, that's like, so it's very inspiring. I admire it, like, especially when people, because it's one thing to be like, you know what, I believe in the endlessness of all things, and that material death is not real death, and I believe in after form and all these kinds of things. But then when confronted with the reality of such a thing, we are made to expose our true selves, I suppose.
Mm,
And what do we really believe in? Um, and and that doesn't mean that that can't change because of an experience. So that is really interesting and inspiring to me to understand, like, the perspective you've had during all of this.
mhm,
Um, and I don't know. And people on the outside looking in, I think oftentimes, at least in Western culture, we're taught so much to avoid death altogether.
mhm,
We bury our dead, we don't talk about it, and things like this. Um, to me, again, from the outside looking in, that might be one of the most difficult aspects of maybe going through an experience like this, is handling the interactions and the conversations with other people from the outside in, who aren't, myself included, like, necessarily well equipped to have these conversations, right?
mhm. Absolutely. Yeah. It's like I say, it's so weird to me that people are so terrified of the idea of death. Because I don't know. I just something in me has always felt like this is not all there is, and maybe it's like you say, the accumulation of all my experiences and little glimpses into other things going on, and I don't know exactly what it is, but from a really young age, I just remember, even I went to Catholic school for 3 years, so a lot of masses every Wednesday, and you know, uh, certainly going to church on Sundays when mom would make me, and um, I just, not that I was against the organized religion, but there was a lot of things I'm like, no, you got that wrong. Like, like that's not right. And I don't even know, looking back and doing research, I've learned, why I might have felt that way, but I certainly didn't know these things at the time. Just somehow that knowledge was there that, you don't have that exactly right. So, certainly didn't express that to anybody at the time, but um, it's interesting thing to look back and kind of, there's definitely been stuff going on that, something, or guides, spirit guides, or my deceased father, or whatever, it something has been pushing me along, or a variety of things have been pushing me along for a long time, kind of giving me little insights into things.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's, as someone who went to Catholic school for 12 years too, and was raised Catholic, I can sympathize with all those. And I'll never forget my grandfather's funeral. This was the first grandparent I had that passed away. Was in a Catholic church, Catholic mass, and I'll just never forget hearing for the first time ever, really, the funeral rites and what the priest was saying. And what really resonated with me the most was when he said, "We choose to believe Bernie is in a better place. We
Mm-hmm.
choose to believe blah 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 blah, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera." And for the first time, I realized, like, oh, okay, they're acknowledging it at the very least. This is a choice that collectively we have made and we are making, and we are expressing through physical form, through ritual, uh, about the afterlife.
Mm-hmm.
And and for all its flaws, and for all my angst and anger that I had over the years built up and towards organized religion, Roman Catholicism specifically, the at the very least, I suppose it imbued me with a sense of wonder and belief about moreness, if
Mm-hmm.
that's even a word, about something more than just this,
Yeah.
right? And for that, I am in this moment for the first time, I think, strangely, realizing that I'm grateful.
I'm glad I
Maybe,
could give that to
yeah,
you,
yeah, maybe I'm no longer feeling sick because I'm actually expressing gratitude.
Or maybe you
Um,
have a fever. No.
maybe I'm so sick that I've that
and
I've
Ryan died the next day.
wow, this thing is like talking, thanking the Catholic Church. Um, but it is like, whether it comes to, like, your experience as an investigator, over a decade ago, having an energy run through you
Mhm.
and want to get to the light, and it evokes such a strong emotion that you start crying in front of essentially strangers,
Mhm.
which is such a vulnerable thing to do. And it is it's profound to me when examining
Mhm.
this connection here, because the profundity comes from the fact that, first of all, it takes someone who is even open to this kind of thing to even be in that situation in the first place. And then it takes another type of person to have the vulnerability, or at least the access to their own vulnerability, to not be so shut down and so closed off from such a thing as to have tears and to cry in front of strangers in that situation. And then the experience itself, which may in the moment have been pretty amazing, pretty strange, pretty wild, pretty paranormal. Later, over a decade later, now you have this conversation with doctors over months and months, and then you have chemotherapy, and where you are actually being told, well, pardon my French, but you can shit and piss in a bag, but it's not going to make you live any longer. Like, who wants to hear that?
Mhm.
Right? You're being confronted with your mortality of the physical form, and yet you have this great spirit and this great comfort in knowing that through the people that have come into your life, that you believe that there is something more for you, not only in the afterlife of the physical form, but in this physical form, that you believe that this isn't over yet.
Mhm.
And I suppose, I don't want to make assumptions here, but I suppose even if you're like, you know what, even if it is, that's fine. And I'm curious about like this experience of having the ghost pass through you and these other things in your life, like they are almost like this security blanket, right? Of
Oh,
like
sure.
knowing that, finality is not finality at all.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like I say, at the time would have deemed myself agnostic. I still kind of feel that way, but I'm much more convinced that there is definitely stuff out there. It's not just I don't know exactly what it is. It's just there's so much out there that I don't comprehend. I know there's a hell of a lot. The little bit of the iceberg that I see, is nothing compared to what's underneath the surface of the water there, and I'm just fascinated by all of it. And I didn't say it before, but even yeah, Oscar has this idea of me going and doing this documentary. I was didn't grow up. I was into animation and illustration when I was a kid, and was going to go to college for that. And when I was 18, got sick with ulcerative colitis that ultimately has led to the colon cancer. But I got away from drawing and stuff and became very interested in film and television and all that stuff, but never had done any of it. And finally, in like 2012, I went back to school and was doing graphic design. It just wasn't really jiving with me, and I was working at a law office that was like family law, and everything was just very stressful there, and all these negative feelings. And I realized very much what it means to be empathic and absorb all that, because I was just super stressed out, and started meditating. And one night I'm meditating and I just hear this voice in my head, loud as day. You need to go to film school. I sat straight up in bed. I'm in the middle of a semester. I the next day dropped that, went to uh, the Art Institute here. My wife had been working at for a number of years. Another thing that, okay, the universe falling into place. Free tuition and all this stuff that I had been resisting for years, and did very well with all that. My own fears have been the biggest thing that's held me back through all this. Of well, I can't do that because I might not make enough money, and it's just interesting. Like everything has pushed me in this direction for so long, and I don't know. I'm not saying that I'm going to make this groundbreaking documentary or anything, but I'm going along for the ride, and it's kind of nice to know that unseen forces seem to have some idea that I'm going to be successful with whatever it is that I end up doing here.
Yeah. And I
I
mean,
just have to be there to document it, I guess.
yeah, and I don't, and I don't doubt it.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of it too, is not knowing the outcome, and um, not having all the answers cultivates the curiosity and the seek itself. And it's just so funny to me every time, because when you bring up agnostic, it I just had this idea. I don't know if it'll make any sense, but hear me out, and I want your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Someone can be agnostic, and then on the other hand, someone can be, I almost want to say, paranostic. Um, and I don't know if this is a new term or not, but if you're paranostic, it's like you don't necessarily believe in God, you believe in energy that has a personality,
Hmm.
right? Like you believe that energy can have all kinds of different personalities. And so it's like if you believe in the personality of energy, you can be paranostic as opposed to agnostic, right? I mean, because I think we would agree that whether it's Oscar or we're talking about anything else, there are distinct and individual quote unquote personalities, for lack of a better term,
Sure.
when it comes to the manifestation of the energy of the universe, right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's yeah, that's absolutely true. My experience is so limited, and now I'm going to be going in and you know head first, I guess not even feet first, with the ayahuasca and stuff, and really, I actually recorded a podcast with Jessica this past weekend, and a lot of it was discussing the ayahuasca experience, and she did some tarot and runes readings and stuff for me, and everything was very positive. But Oscar's like, be prepared. It's gonna be a mind fuck. It's like it's I don't even know what to expect. I certainly have heard a lot of people's experiences, and um, it just seems to be somebody comes and tells you what's going on, or shows you a glimpse into the universe that you are not, no matter how mentally prepared you think you are, you're not prepared for. And
Well,
it's kind of interesting.
yeah, and there's a bravery that goes with that, and there's a courage,
Mm,
and as of this recording, I still have not partaken in the ceremony. Um, I still have DMT that I haven't used again. But who knows? Who knows what the future holds?
yeah.
I think I'm. Someone suggested to me the other day, because I was like, like I said, like when I can be a little prickly, and I can be a little, kind of edgy when I'm sick, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I need another 24 hours of just like silence,
Mm,
of no talking, no reading, no watching, no listening, and just kind of meditating and things like that. But it's these things, and you talk about meditation earlier, and I think all of these things come into play when you start to understand a person who has an outlook or a way of living, in a way of confronting struggle and or adversity or unexpected happenings in their life, without having to give them positive or negative connotation. People who handle those things in a way that the rest of the world, the rest of us, are like, that's really great, that's really awesome. There seem to be these characteristics that are always showing up, and meditation, spirituality,
mm,
open-mindedness, obviously positivity, which kind of like feeds into this idea of being able to maintain this positive outlook, and having like a positive paranormal outlook, I guess, is the way you could almost frame it, to the idea of, I am thinking positively about the unknown and the mysterious and the other and the supernatural and whatever else is happening in the future.
yeah, yeah. It's I guess for myself, I just don't really know how else to be. I've always been very much go with the flow type person, and um, it's funny because I do have half my father's family is Jewish, and so I have the tendency to be that neurotic Jew, stereotypical thing as well. I can certainly get up in my head and bind myself up into knots if I am not careful. So I've had to, through my life, just kind of learn to let go of that as much as possible, and not let it dictate how I live my life. But um, I certainly, you know, like you say, the meditation and the just all these tools have as even though I've never really practiced them to the extent that I want to or probably should, they've been such positive tools, and it's interesting to me that when I go in search of these things, I tend to find them. It's very little has happened to me, that I didn't go looking for. now more than certainly before, but um, when I have gone to search for these answers myself, I tend to find at least enough to show that I'm on the right track.
Hmm.
That you know that unseen hand, or that unseen force that seems to be guiding me or whatever. It it's not always easy, and it's not always you know I'm a very, like I say, can be a very logical, literal person. I just want somebody to tell me what's going on, but the more I kind of give into it, the more I find myself on the right path.
Well, hell yeah. Well, I mean, I think it's a beautiful thing to witness, and I'm honored to be your buddy,
I
to be your
appreciate that.
friend, and I'm glad that we had this time to chat today. And I think post uh, Columbia trip, maybe we'll revisit, and maybe you can share with us some of the experience there if you're open to it.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and
Come back a
obviously,
changed man, and
yeah.
this major spiritualist, and no, man, you didn't kill that mosquito. It's another soul, man.
Yeah, I mean,
I,
mosquitoes are the one insect, I think, the one life form on this planet that everybody is just like, all life is precious, except.
yeah, I'm not too fond of cockroaches either.
Oh yeah,
Growing,
cockroaches as well. Even although their survival is admirable, but
oh,
the
absolutely,
but yeah. Well, Adam, this has been fun.
absolutely.
I appreciate you doing it. Is there anything at all? I mean, I guess we can plug the documentary later once all that
Yeah,
is once
once we figure out what that's gonna be.
once we figure out what that is. But
Yeah, I'm as curious as everybody else to see where that leads.
okay. Well, is there anything you want to leave everybody with, or anything you want them to be able to find on the internet or anything like that?
No, not really. I'm not a very public figure, but Super Fleisher on Instagram. If you want to follow me, I post a lot of pictures of my kittens lately. That's about the
Well,
most
that's
exciting thing of my 2022. So
well, much like the name of the podcast that you help out on. That's good medicine.
yeah,
The
absolutely.
Who doesn't love pictures of kittens?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, Adam, thanks again. And thank you for listening, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that chat. I know I did. And RyanStearnComedy.com. Boom. That's got all of the information. I'll be with Karen Rontalski in Illinois on October 15th. And then I'll be in Cleveland. And then I'll be in Detroit. All those dates are on the website. So check that out. But thanks again for listening. And I guess I'll say this for Adam and myself. If we don't see you, well, it's probably more likely that, especially with this Columbia trip, that it's more likely that he will see you at the watering hole in the astral plane. So I hope to see you there too, if I'm not seeing you at a show sometime. So thanks again, buddy. I appreciate it.
thank you.
And we'll catch
Honor.
up soon.
Absolutely.